My name is Silas. I'm 32 years old, and the morning my older brother Reuben sold his half of our family's oyster grounds to the dredge company and drove his truck north out of town for good. I was already out on the water he had just signed away, culling oysters over a bar the Tolliver name had held for 3 generations, not knowing yet that half of it was no longer ours to hold. He did not stop at the dock to tell me. He left a folded paper on the kitchen table under the sugar bowl and drove off before the sun was up. And by the time I came in off the tide and read it, the ink was dry and the deal was already done. Reuben had sold his half of the Tolliver grounds to a man named Renner, who ran an industrial dredge outfit, and he had taken the money and gone to find a life that did not smell of salt and diesel and low tide. I stood in that kitchen with my brother's handwriting in my hand and understood 2 things at once. 1, that I was alone on the water now. 2, that the man I had just been made partners with, without my say, was the one man on the whole bay who wanted our grounds dead. I want to be honest about what that did to me, because if you do not understand the sting of it, nothing else I tell you will land right. It was not the money. Reuben had every right to his half, and I never begrudged him $1 of it. It was that he cashed out and I stayed. When the bed started failing and the winters got lean and the work got harder for less, my brother looked at all of it and decided it was a thing you sell, and I looked at the same thing and decided it was a thing you keep. He got to be the one who left. I got to be the one who stayed, alone on a dying water, holding a name that suddenly meant only one man. Months after that folded paper, I would take my boat out into a hurricane and leave my own gear to the storm for people I was under no obligation to save. And a proud waterwoman I had started off on the worst possible foot with would look at me across a heaving deck in the thick of it and say 5 words that reached all the way back to the morning my brother left. But I am running ahead of the tide. Let me start where the wound was, because you cannot understand why I went back out into that storm until you understand the man who was so bone-tired of being the one who stays. The Tolliver grounds lay at the mouth of the Little Coot, off a working dock called Wicket's Reach, and for as long as anyone could remember they had been marked by our buoys. I need to tell you about the buoys, because they are the whole heart of this. A waterman's floats are not just cork and paint. On our part of the bay, every family that holds ground paints its buoys in a pattern all its own, and that pattern is registered with the state, written down in a book. A family's colors the way a flag is a country's colors. The Tolliver colors were green over white with a band of oxblood red around the middle, and my grandfather had mixed that red himself out of iron and linseed oil the year he first put our floats on that bottom, and my father had painted the same 3 colors after him, and I had painted them after that. Green, white, and that deep red. Tolliver ground. Ours since before I was born. So when Renner's crew started pulling our floats off the water and dropping their own plain orange markers in their place, it did not feel like vandalism. It felt like somebody hauling down a flag my family had flown for 60 years and running up their own over the top of it. Renner had bought Reuben's half, and to hear his lawyer tell it, that made him half owner of the whole works, free to work the ground however he pleased. What the lawyer did not say, because it did not suit him, was that a good part of the Tolliver grounds sat inside a state oyster sanctuary. Closed water. Ground where no power dredge was ever allowed to drag. Ground you could tend by hand with tongs the old way, but never strip with hydraulics. The buoys marked the line of it. Our colors, registered in that state book, were the plain proof of where the closed ground began and whose hands had kept it. Pull the buoys and the line got blurry, and a man with a big steel boat could stand up in a courtroom and swear he never knew where the closed water started. That was why Renner wanted our colors off the bay. Not for spite. For cover. Renner himself I hardly ever saw in those first weeks. He was a money man who ran his water from an office in the county seat while his boat did the work. The boat I saw plenty. She was a steel dredger near 90 feet, painted a dull rust gray, and he had named her the Dominion, which told you everything you needed to know about how the man saw the bay. Her hydraulic dredge chewed the reef down to hardpan and ground the rest, the small ones and the spat, and the century of built shell, into gray rubble that washed away on the next tide. The law was plain about where she could and could not drag. Renner simply worked the edges of plain, and when he wanted to work ground that was flatly closed, he worked it at night, on the dark of the moon, fast, and gone before any patrol skiff could cross the open bay to reach him. Everybody on the coot knew it. Knowing a thing and proving it are two different waters. The only thing that kept me tied to the living that winter was a waterman named Buck Lowther, who worked 2 slips down from mine, and had known me since we were boys throwing oyster shells at pilings. Buck was loud where I had gone quiet. He would bang on my hull before dawn and holler that the oysters would not tongue themselves, and he would talk the whole run out about nothing at all. His bad knees, his truck, the ball game, just to keep a rope of ordinary words strung between me and the silence I had built. When I told him one gray afternoon that I was thinking of selling out too, of taking whatever Renner would give for the other half and following my brother north, Buck did not argue. He just said you could. Plenty do. But then there would not be a single Tolliver boy left on this water, and your grandfather's red would be gone off the bay for good. And some morning you would be sitting at a stoplight in a city somewhere, and you would feel it go out of the world. I did not have an answer for that. I painted my boys again that spring. Green, white, and the red. I only knew I was not ready yet to be the one who let the color die. I first met Cass Vane on a gray afternoon in late September, and she made it plain inside of a minute that she wanted nothing to do with any man who carried my last name. I had run down toward the sanctuary line to reset a boy Renner's crew had pulled, and I came around a hook of marsh grass, and there she was, standing in the stern of an old wooden boat called the Reedbird, hauling a cull of oysters up over the washboard by main strength, her jaw set like a piling. She was about my age, lean and sun-worn, her dark hair pulled back under a knit cap, and she was working the Vane grounds, which lay right alongside ours, some of the last hand-tongued bottom left in that part of the bay. I lifted a hand to be neighborly. She looked at me the way you look at a dog you have not decided about, and when I told her my name, something in her face closed like a door. "You're a Tolliver," she said. I said I was. She said, "Then you are half of why that steel boat thinks it owns this creek. Your brother took Renner's money, and now Renner drags his dredge 100 yards off my father's grave of a morning, and every last one of you Tollivers is the reason." She was not wrong, and that was the worst of it. I could have told her that I had fought Renner every way a lone man could, that I had reset our boys 40 times, that I hated what my brother did more than she ever could. I did not say any of it. I just took the boy I had come to set, our green and white and red, and I dropped it back on the sanctuary line where it belonged, right there in front of her, and I set the anchor line true, and I tipped my cap and idled off without another word. Behind me, I heard her go quiet. I think that was the first time she understood that a Tolliver was still fighting for that water, even after a Tolliver had sold it. That night at the dock store over the top of a coffee can, an old fellow named Griff who ran the place and manned the marine radio told me the shape of the Vane family, because I asked. Cass's father was Holly's Vane, who had worked those beds his whole life and his father before him, and the Vane colors, blue over white, had marked that ground as long as the Tolliver colors had marked ours. Holly's had passed the winter before, his heart quitting in his own skiff on a cold, gray morning, found drifting near the channel with his tongs still across his knees. Cass had come home from a life inland to work the beds because there was no one else who would, and the only help she had was her father's sister, an aunt named Verna, near 70, who could still cull faster than a woman half her age but whose hands had started to knot up with the cold. So it was Cass and old Verna and 100 years of Vane bottom, and a steel dredge working the dark right up against their line, and a stubbornness in that woman that Griff said would either save her or sink her. I understood it. I had the same disease. I did not help her because she asked. She never in 100 years would have asked. I helped her because one dawn I came down the creek and found the Reedbird low at her mooring with a plank stove in below the waterline. No accident. The kind of quiet cruelty Renner's people had started to specialize in, and Cass on the dock with a bilge pump and a face gone past crying, and old Verna beside her in a man's canvas coat that must have been Holly's. I tied up my boat, the Sari Bell, and I walked over, and I did not ask permission. I knelt at the stove plank and started figuring how to feather a patch over it, the way my father had taught me. And after a minute, Cass crouched down beside me with the pump, and neither of us said one word about the day we met, and that was how it started. Not with a kindness she asked for. With one she could not stop me from giving. We got the reed bird floating by noon. Cass stood on the dock wiping her hands, and finally she said, "Why?" "Just that. Why would a tolliver bail a vein boat?" And I told her the truest thing I had. I said my brother sold our water and drove off, and I stayed, and staying alone had gotten so quiet I could hardly stand it, and that watching her fight for the vein bottom was the first thing in a year that made me want to keep fighting for mine. I said we were both holding a line against the same steel boat, and a line is easier to hold with two hands than with one. She looked at me a long moment. Then she went into the little shed at the head of the vein dock and came back with something rolled up in oilcloth, and she spread it out on a barrel top, and it was an old chart of the mouth of the coot, hand-marked, going back further than either of us had been alive. And there, inked along the sanctuary line, were the boy colors of every family that had ever held that ground. The vein blue and white, and right beside it, sharing the very same line, the tolliver green and white and red. Our grandfathers had painted their colors on that water side by side for 60 years, holding the closed ground between them, tonging it by hand, and letting the dredges nowhere near it. Cass put her finger on the two patterns lying next to each other, and she said, "Quiet. My father always told me the day the tolliver red went off this water was the day we were all finished." I looked at that chart a long time. Then I told her the red was not off the water yet. What we did next is the thing I think of first when I think of that whole autumn. Renner's crew, emboldened, went down the sanctuary line 1 week and pulled every last buoy off it. Ours and the veins both, dumping 60 years of colors in a heap on the Dominion's steel deck. So that by afternoon there was not a single float on the closed line, and a man could claim, if it ever came to it, that he had no way of knowing where the sanctuary began. It was meant to break us. It did the opposite. Word went up and down the creek by supper time, and the next morning I came out to find not just Cass and Verna, but Buck, and a leathery old waterman named Delmer, and a slow, careful one named Pryor, and 2 others, 7 boats in all, riding at the mouth of the coot in the gray dawn with fresh-painted buoys stacked in every cockpit. We had painted through the night, all of us in Griff's shed and on our own docks, dozens of them. And we spent that entire day, in a cold September rain, resetting the sanctuary line by hand, float by float, until the closed ground was marked plainer than it had been in 20 years. Cass worked the reed bird beside my Sari Bell the whole day long, and somewhere in the middle of it, soaked to the skin and half laughing at the sheer stubbornness of what we were doing, she stopped fighting me. When we set the last buoy at dusk, 7 boats sat in a line in the rain and looked at a mile of bright colors riding the chop where that morning there had been nothing at all. And nobody cheered, because watermen do not cheer, but old Delmer took off his cap, and on that water, that said everything. After that day, we were not 2 people holding 2 separate lines. We were one crew. I ran my own grounds in the early dark, and then brought the Sari Bell down to work the sanctuary alongside the reed bird. And I found, to my own surprise, that I was not the one who stays anymore. I was one of a handful who stayed together, and that, it turns out, is an entirely different thing. I fell in love with Cass the way you come up on a shoal in fog, slow, and then all at once and too late to turn back. It was the way she talked to Verna, patient and teasing, keeping the old woman laughing right through the ache in her hands. It was the way she worked without complaint, her whole body bent to the single task of not letting her father's water go under. It was the way she had touched those 2 color patterns on the old chart, like they were living things. One evening on the vein dock, with the light going gold across the marsh, I told her I did not have much to offer a person, a dying trade, and a name my own brother had walked away from, but that whatever I did have was hers if she wanted it. She did not answer in words. She reached over and took my rough tonging hand in her rough tonging hand, and held it while the sun went down over the reeds. There was one kiss that autumn, salt on both our mouths, and I will keep the rest of it to myself, because some things are not for the telling. But Renner was still out there, and a happiness like that always seems to draw the storm. He came at us the cruel, patient way of a man who has never once been told no, and made to believe it. First, it was more buoys pulled, then cut mooring lines and sugar in a fuel tank, and a note left under the Sari Bell's wiper in block letters telling me to take the deal my brother took and go. Then, on a black moonless night when none of us were out, the Dominion came up into the mouth of the Coot and dragged her heavy gear straight across the heart of the sanctuary, the oldest reef, the ground both our grandfathers had tended. And when we came out at dawn, the bottom was churned to gray soup, and the oysters we had left to grow were ground to hash. 60 years of handwork erased in a single greedy night. Our bright boys rode over a graveyard. Cass did not cry. That was almost the worst of it. She stood in the stern of the Reedbird looking down into that ruined water and went somewhere very far away. And when she came back, she said, quiet and final, that maybe her father had been wrong after all. That maybe you could not hold water like this against a man with that much steel and money. That maybe the only smart thing left was to take whatever Renner offered and let him have the grave he had already made. And I felt the old pull come up in me then, stronger than it had been in all that year. Because here is the thing I had never told Cass. Renner's offer on my half was still open. His lawyer had left a number, and the number had not gotten smaller, and there were nights that whole winter when I sat at my grandfather's kitchen table with my brother's folded paper in the drawer and thought, Reuben was not a coward. Reuben was only first. He looked at the water going and got out clean, and here I was painting buoys over a graveyard like a fool, being the one who stays right up until staying kills me too. I could take the money. I could find Cass and Werner a soft landing with it. For about a week that winter, God help me, I very nearly drove north myself. What turned me back was a small thing. I went down to Griff's shed one cold evening to clear out my paint and my spare gear, half decided to be done with all of it, and Verna was there. She did not know what I had come to do. She was sitting on a nail keg with one of the vain boys in her lap and a brush in her knotted hand, touching up the blue, slow, because the cold made her slow, and she looked up at me and said, Holly's always told me the colors do not belong to us. She said we just keep them wet for the next ones. And then she went back to her painting, like she had not just said the truest thing I ever heard. I stood in that shed and I looked at my own stack of boys, green and white and my grandfather's oxblood red, and I understood that selling was not the safe choice, and it was not the smart choice. It was only a slower way of doing exactly what my brother had done, and I found that I did not want to be the second Tolliver to let the color die. I picked up a brush. I did not drive north. I painted the red. The hurricane came at the tail end of that same season. They named it, and I will not, but it came up the coast fast and mean, a big late-season storm. And by the time it was 2 days out, the marine forecast was nothing but warnings. Every waterman on the Coot hauled his boat, or doubled his lines, and moved his family to high ground. Griff boarded up the store. Buck begged me to help him haul his boat and then get myself inland, and I meant to do exactly that. But sitting in Griff's shed the night before it hit, listening to the wind already beginning to find the gaps in the walls, I worked out what Renner was going to do, because it was exactly what a man like him would do. He would not haul out for a storm. He would see the hurricane the way he saw every other thing, as cover. Every honest boat would be off the water, and every patrol tied up onshore managing the evacuation. For one long violent night, the bay would belong to whoever was reckless enough to work it, and Renner had the biggest, heaviest boat on the Coot, and no line he would not cross for money. He was going to run the Dominion straight through the storm and strip the sanctuary bare, while not one soul could see him do it. And by the time the water calmed, there would be nothing left of either family's ground but mud, and no boys left to say he had ever crossed a line at all. I could not let that stand, but I want to be plain about what the storm actually asked of me, because it was not a grand and noble thing. It was a small, ugly, practical thing. When the wind came up hard the next afternoon, ahead of the worst of it, I stood at my own slip with a choice in front of me. I could spend the last hour of workable weather hauling out the Sari Bell and saving my floats and tongs and gear. My whole living, everything a broke man who had already lost half his ground had left in this world. Or I could leave every bit of it to the storm and go, because a call had just come crackling over Griff's marine radio that turned an ordinary bad afternoon into the one afternoon that decides who a man actually is. Here is what had happened while I was down at my slip, lashing down my own boat. Buck and old Delmer, and prior, the same stubborn men who had helped us reset the whole line in the rain, had gotten the very same idea I had about Renner, and they had decided that if the Dominion was going to work the storm, then they were going to be out there to see her do it, to film it on a phone in a dry bag, to finally catch that steel boat dredging closed water where she could not run away from what she was. They took 2 small boats out into the mouth of the Coot, in the teeth of a rising hurricane to catch a criminal in the act. And Cass, who had gone down to double the Reedbirds' lines one last time, saw them go, and she knew that stretch of water in the dark better than any of them because it was her father's water and her father's father's, and she took the Reedbird out after them to drag them back before they got themselves killed. And then the storm closed its fist, and the radio went to nothing but wind and static, and Griff got just enough of one broken transmission to know that 4 people he had known their whole lives were out on that black water and not answering. So there it was. My boat, my gear, my whole living on the one side, an hour from being smashed to splinters if I did not haul it out that minute. And on the other side, Cass and Buck and 2 old men out in the dark in a hurricane. And the thing I had spent a whole hard year learning was steady under all of it. The one who stays is not the fool. The one who stays is the one who is there when it finally matters. I left my boat where she sat. I left my floats and my tongs and my grandfather's colors stacked on the dock to take their own chances with the surge. And I took the Saribel off her lines, and I ran her straight out into the hurricane for 4 people, 3 of whom I had known my whole life, and one I had known for a single autumn and already could not imagine the water without. I will not pretend I remember all of it in order. A hurricane on the bay is not weather. It is a live thing trying to end you. The seas came from every direction at once, black and taller than the wheelhouse, and the rain went sideways hard enough to strip paint, and the wind screamed through every gap it could find. The Saribel climbed those seas and slammed down the far side of them until my teeth ached, and I ran without lights toward the mouth of the Coot, steering by the shape of the marsh I had known since I was a boy, because a man who grows up on a water carries its map in his hands even when he cannot see. I found Delmer and Pryor first, their skiff swamped and rolling, the 2 old men clinging to the hull, and I came up under their lee and took the sea on my own beam to make a pocket of calm and hauled them both aboard, gasping and swearing and alive. Buckeye found a 1/4 mile on, his engine dead, his boat filling, and he came across to me on a line with the water at his waist and put his forehead against mine for 1 second, our old boyhood signal that we were both still here, and then he took the wheel so I could work the deck, the way Buck has always held the wheel steady so I could do the hard thing. But there was no Cass. We ran the mouth of the Coot in that screaming dark, and there was no Reedbird anywhere, and I felt a fear come up in me worse than any grief I had ever carried, and I nearly came apart at the wheel. Then Pryor grabbed my arm and pointed, and there, lit up blue-white in a long flash of lightning, was the Dominion. Renner's steel dredge was hard aground on the very sanctuary line we had marked in fresh paint, driven up onto the closed reef by the storm and going down by the stern, her hydraulic dredge still deployed and dripping in the lightning, caught in the exact act she had come out to do, in the exact water she was never once allowed to touch. And there, half swamped but still afloat in the lee of that sinking steel monster, tangled in the Dominion's own drift, was the Reedbird. Cass had not been able to find the old men in the dark, but she had found Renner. And Renner, running blind and heavy through the storm to strip the closed ground, had driven his dredge straight up onto the sanctuary reef, the one line every vein and tolliver for 60 years could have told him was there. The line marked that very autumn in fresh paint by 7 boats in the rain. The bay had caught him in the exact place he had come to rob. We came alongside the Reedbird, and I got Cass across onto the Saribel with my own 2 hands, soaked and shaking and furious and alive, so alive, and I held on to her 1 hard second longer than I strictly needed to. And up on the tilting deck of the Dominion was Renner himself, who had come out to captain the theft in person, the water climbing his legs, screaming for help. No lawyer now, no dark to hide in. Just a man about to drown in front of the people he had spent a year trying to ruin. Cass looked at him. She looked at me. And I knew exactly what she was thinking, because I was thinking it too, that we could just let the bay have him the way he had tried so hard to let it have everything we loved. We did not. We put a line on Renner, and we hauled him off his sinking dredge and down into the bottom of my boat. And we did it because you do not become the thing that hurt you, not if you ever want to look at your own hands again afterward. Renner lay in the scuppers and said nothing at all, and neither did we. And that was when she said it. We were running for the dock through the tail of the storm with 6 souls aboard, the wind finally easing off the top of its scream, and Cass was beside me with her hand white on the rail. And she looked at me, at the man who had left his own boat and gear and his grandfather's colors to the storm and come out into it for her. And she said the 5 words that reached all the way back to the morning my brother drove off. She said, "You're the one who stayed. Not the one who sold. Not the one who left. The one who stayed." And I understood in that moment that the word had turned all the way over across that year, from the loneliest thing I knew into the only thing worth being. I did not answer her. I did not have to. I held the wheel and I ran us home. Dawn came the way it does after a hurricane, unfairly beautiful. The sky washed to a soft blue-gray, and the first warm light sliding low across a bay gone suddenly, exhaustedly calm. I remember standing on the storm-racked dock at Wickett's Reach in my oilskins, bone-tired, making the Sari bell fast to a piling with hands that would not stop shaking. And I remember turning around and finding Cass standing there in the gray light looking at me. She was soaked and gray-faced, and there was a strand of marsh grass caught in her hair, and her eyes were full of everything we had just lived through, the terror and the fury and the relief so heavy it looked almost like pain. Behind her, the skipjacks rode at their moorings, and the gulls came wheeling back over the calm water as if nothing at all had happened. And out at the mouth of the Coot, the Dominion lay dead on the sanctuary bar with her back broken, going nowhere ever again. Cass did not run to me the way they do in stories. She crossed the wet planking and put her forehead against my chest, our signal now too, that we were still here. And we stood in the new light and let the water drip off us and did not say one thing because there was nothing left that needed saying. Renner was finished, and he was finished by his own hand. The Dominion aground on the closed sanctuary line, in a marked closed sanctuary, with her illegal dredge gear deployed in a documented hurricane, was every bit of the evidence that 2 years of complaints had never once managed to gather. The Marine police who came out at first light, pulled off the evacuation by the Maydays, did not need much more than the sight of that steel boat sitting flat on protected bottom with her rig down. And Buck and Delmer and Pryor, it turned out, had gotten their footage before they were swamped, the Dominion dragging the closed reef in the lightning with our fresh buoys plain in the frame, the registered colors marking the exact line she was never once allowed to cross. There were charges more than I can list, and fines that took everything Renner had, and a court over the winter that Cass and I sat through every single day of. And at the end of it, the man who had bought my brother's half was barred from the bay for good, and his dredge was cut up for scrap. His claim on the Tolliver grounds went out the door with him. What the law finally understood, with our colors on that old chart and the sanctuary line marked plain in the water, was that the closed ground had never been Reuben's to sell in the first place, and so it had never once been Renner's to buy. The water came home, and here is the part the storm gave us that not one of us expected. When the water cleared that spring, the sanctuary was not dead. The hurricane, for all its cruelty, had done one strange kindness. It had scoured off the silt and the disease-choked muck that had been smothering the reef, and it had spread the broken shell that Renner's own dragging left across clean bottom. And clean shell is exactly what a young oyster needs to catch and grow on. By the second summer, there was a set on the old sanctuary ground like nobody had seen in 30 years, and the bottom everybody had called dying turned out to have only been waiting for somebody to hold the line long enough for the water to heal itself. We reset the colors that spring, all of them, on clean water over living ground. Green and white and my grandfather's oxblood red, and the vein blue and white right alongside it, The two patterns riding the sanctuary line, exactly the way they sat on that old chart in the shed. The way they had ridden the chop when Holly's Vane and my grandfather were young men holding the closed ground between them. We did not work two separate grounds anymore. We worked one water together, the Vane bottom and the Tolliver bottom tongued by two families as one, the Sari Bell and the Reedbird side by side from first light, and Verna in the stern of one or the other on the calm days, culling slow with her knotted hands, keeping the colors wet, she said, for the next ones. Cass and I were married the next fall, out on the water, which is the only place either of us would have stood for it. Griff shut the store and came. Buck stood up beside me and did not manage to hold his peace through 1 minute of it. Verna cried and said Holly's would have liked me, which from Verna was very near to a song. We said our few plain words in the cockpit of the Sari Bell, with the Reedbird rafted alongside, and both families' boys riding bright all down the sanctuary line around us. Green and white and red, blue and white, 60 years of colors flying over ground that was ours again and living again. There was no church that could have held what I felt out there. The water held it fine. My brother Reuben did not come to the wedding. He sent a card, a plain one, with a few lines in the same handwriting I had found under the sugar bowl the morning he drove off, and all it said was that he was glad the water had stayed in the family, and that he was sorry, and that he had always known I was the better waterman of the two of us. I do not hold it against him anymore, wherever he is out there. Reuben looked at the water and saw a thing you sell. I looked at the same water and saw a thing you keep. We were each of us right about ourselves. He was only wrong about which of us the water was going to need. I keep his card in the drawer now, with the folded paper, the leaving and the sorry lying side by side. And some mornings I read the both of them before I go out, and then I go out, because that turned out to be the whole answer I ever found. You go out. My name is Silas. I am 32 years old, and for one hard year I believed that being the one who stays was the loneliest and most foolish thing a man could be. That my brother had been the smart one, the free one, and that staying on a dying water while my own blood cashed out was just a slow way of drowning on dry land. I was wrong, and it took a proud waterwoman in patched waders, and an old ant painting blew onto a boy in a cold shed, and a mile of my grandfather's color riding the chop where a steel boat had wanted only mud, to teach me how wrong I was. Anyone can leave. Leaving is the easy thing, and the horizon always looks kind from the window of a moving truck. Staying is the hard and holy thing. Staying is what puts a man on the dock the night the storm comes, close enough to go out for the ones who need him. I stayed, and because I stayed I was there, and because I was there we all came home. The woman who once would not so much as shake a Tolliver's hand is asleep in the next room now, and her rough hand, the one that took mine on that dock, is the last thing I hold every night before the dark and the first thing I reach for when the light comes back over the water. The colors are flying. The ground is ours. I am the one who stayed, and it turned out to be the best thing I ever did. Would you have left your own boat to the storm to save a stranger's?